Okay, so again, we're in Mark chapter 4, and in the same day, when the even was come, he saith unto them, Let us pass over unto the other side. And when they had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the ship. And there were also with him other little ships. Jesus had been preaching all day. And the preceding verses that were not included in our reading were a series of parables of the sower and the soils, parable of the seed, parable of the mustard seed, all about God's kingdom. And as he was wont to do, Jesus had likely, when the crowds kind of gathered and got a little thick and pressed in kind of close, had a habit of hopping on one of the boats and going offshore just a little bit so he could be up and be able to be seen and heard a little bit better while he was preaching. So he'd been preaching all day, and he was tired, and he told his disciples that he wanted them to go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And here we see, like his disciples, Jesus had the real physical needs of a human being. But his disciples here shortly are going to get an upfront, close, and personal lesson about the power of God's kingdom. Now, there's a couple insignificant details in the verses here, such as at the end of verse 36, there were also with him other little ships. It's an insignificant detail. It's not important to the story, but it helps remind us that this was a true eyewitness account, not just some kind of fuzzy, hazy legend. And it was probably Peter, being the eyewitness, telling it to Mark, who scribed it down and preserved it. So then we go to the storm. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full. Because you got to remember, the Sea of Galilee was pretty famous for some sudden and severe storms, because the winds would funnel through the passes and the canyons of the surrounding hills and they create severe turbulence on the water. And as experienced fishermen, as most of these disciples were, they knew that that was almost a constant risk in the profession of being fishermen. But again, this was an incredibly strong storm. Even these seasoned fishermen were alarmed. And it was scaring them. And it was so bad that the boat was getting swamped by the waves and was in danger of going under and capsizing. Now, did the disciples get in this pickle because they disobeyed God? Were they like Jonah, running the other way? Nope. Actually, they were in this situation because they did obey Jesus. We have to remember, sometimes our problems in life are not because we disobey God. Sometimes we have problems in our lives that are pretty significant because we do obey God. That God also has the power to bring us through those problems. Now, did Jesus intentionally direct his disciples into the storm? Maybe. Because it helped further reveal to them who he is. So that's possible. Okay, verse 38, and he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow, and they awake him and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? You see another insignificant detail here. He was asleep on a pillow, or on a cushion in the stern. Again, these are historical events. They're not myths. And kind of bolstering that fact, you would think that if it were a non-historical or a fictional account, the disciples probably would have made themselves out to look a little bit better than they did sometimes, because it wasn't always flattering. But at any rate, back to the historical events. So they're on the ship in the Sea of Galilee. They're going to the other side after a long day of preaching, and we have an exhausted Jesus. He's fully human, sleeping soundly in the midst of this terrible storm that put the boats in real jeopardy of sinking. And We see Jesus' humanity, his human weakness of being exhausted after that long day of teaching. And it shows through here because he needed rest. Yeah. But his disciples hadn't woken him up when it clouded up. They hadn't woken him up when it started raining and blowing, or really even when the storm initially started hammering the boats. But the disciples, who were also mostly experienced fishermen, knew they needed Jesus by this point because the situation had become life or death serious. Now, did the fishermen think that they could handle things and maybe then realize at a certain point they were truly in desperate straits and only then went to Jesus as a last resort? Sound familiar? Do we do that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do tend to. But pay attention to the question here. They asked him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? The disciples weren't really questioning Jesus' power because it seems that they believed he could do something. We don't really know what, whether he was going to call out to God in prayer or do something else, but they believed they had the power to fix their predicament. Otherwise, why would they have woken him up? I mean, were they like in heavy traffic, and if you're driving, you've got a passenger going, hey, wake up, you got to see this wreck we're going to get in. Are they telling him, wake up and save yourself because we're going down? Well, no, but again, you got to pay attention to the question they asked. What they actually asked Jesus was whether or not he cared about them. They were questioning his character, not his power, which is kind of a weird question. Verses 39 and 40. And he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? What can Jesus do? I'll tell you what he didn't do. He didn't repeatedly pray to God about the weather like Elijah did. He didn't act in response to an instruction from God like Moses would have. He didn't even act like a prophet. He didn't perform any elaborate ritual or ceremony. He didn't even pray. Jesus just spoke and told the storm basically to knock it off. So the storm obeyed, and suddenly and dramatically it died off. And the disciples who had been in fear for their lives from the storm seconds before were now kind of spooked because they reverently realized the tremendous power that Jesus had just demonstrated to them. He had their attention now, because only God could calm a storm like that. And now having their attention, Jesus rebuked them for having no faith. Why'd he do that? I mean, they had faith in his power. They knew he could do something. But that's the point. They had believed that Jesus had the power. That genuine faith involves more than just belief in his power. It also includes our trust in his love for us. Because again, that was the question that they asked, that they were catching it from Jesus for. So when we acknowledge that God is all powerful, yet we still doubt that he cares for us, we're not really displaying true faith at that point. We have to believe in both his power and his goodness. We have to trust God even when he doesn't seem to be doing anything for us. Now here, if the disciples deeply believed that Jesus was the Messiah, that Jesus was on a divine mission, and that God would not allow Jesus to drown in a boat due to a storm when his mission wasn't done, they could have been confident in their safety by extension, even though they did not see God intervening at that point. They might still have woken Jesus up and asked for his help, but they would ask a different question if they were displaying true faith. When we have faith and a proper fear of God, we do not need to fear anyone or anything else. God has dominion over all of his creation. If God is with us, who can be against us?
Amen.
Because nothing can separate us from God's love, except maybe ourselves when we get in our own way. Are we fearing God, or are we fearing our circumstances? If we're fearing our circumstances, we probably need to spend some time thinking about who God is, because God has the power to solve all of our problems, and for some reason he still loves us. But as here, when Jesus calmed the storm despite the disciples' lack of true faith, God still hears us, even when our faith is weak, and we have doubts, or we question whether or not God cares about us. Because no matter how weak our faith is, God's not going to turn us away. Okay, wrapping up in verse 41. And they feared exceedingly, and said one to another, what manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Jesus is easily able to deliver us from our problems in our lives, no matter how bad they are, no matter how insurmountable they seem to us as mere humans. But the main point is that Jesus is truly God and truly man, both at the same time. So who is Jesus to us? That's the question. Now, Mark does not explicitly answer the question in Scripture, but this story provides clear evidence of the answer. Jesus is the Son of God. He was a real man who got tired. When he got tired, he needed rest. When he got hungry or thirsty, he needed food and water, just as we do. But he was fully and truly. I love it when the keyboard pops up. So he was fully and truly human. When he took on humanity, he was made like us in every way except one. What's that one way? Didn't sin like we did. But he's also truly and fully God at the same time. It's not binary. He possessed the power to control the storm. He wasn't a prophet who needed to plead with God to change the weather or to respond to God's command. He's not partly divine or part of the divine. He is completely God. Jesus is fully human and fully divine at the same time. Now it's kind of weird because heresy in the early church usually took the form because they were more likely to deny that Jesus was fully human. They believed he was fully divine. They got that part. Now, being the very logical and consistent beings that we are, today heretics are more likely to accept Jesus' humanity as a historical figure because there's ample evidence of that. But today we tend to question his divinity. But if Jesus was not God, he would not have been capable of redeeming us. Yet if he weren't man, he wouldn't have been able to represent us before God. So he's both fully at the same time. And if you like Venn diagrams, that's going to give you just one big, very dense circle. If we forget Jesus' divinity, we miss out on his authority and his power, or his dominion, over us and everything in the world. But if we forget his humanity, we're going to miss out on that he understands us and he sympathizes with our weaknesses, because he needs all that together at the same time. Okay, new squirrel. So Jesus has power over nature. He isn't surprised or worried about anything because he's been there, he's done that. He made the closet full of t-shirts. Sometimes obeying Jesus will lead us into difficulty just as much as if we disobey Jesus, or just as if we disobey Jesus in other circumstances. But Jesus understands our needs. He's been there, he's done that, he's walked in our shoes. So we can pray confidently because he gets it. Now when difficulty comes, sometimes we doubt his goodness. But God answers our prayers even when we have even only just a little faith. Not the faith that we should be having. If we have even a little faith, he's going to answer our prayers. And Jesus has power that belongs to God alone, and therefore he is fully God. If we doubt God's goodness, that shows that we lack true faith, even if we believe in his power, because it's the belief in the power and the faith that he loves us, no matter what, whether we deserve it or not, because usually we don't. And then finally, God's to be feared, because he is all-powerful. So what omits?
It's interesting that, you know, Michelle was listening to what was it, Vlad? He was talking about where Jesus walked on the water, which happens after this.
Mm-hmm.
But the point of it is that even then, Jesus put them in a boat and sent them right into the storm.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus knew where the storm was and is going to be. Mm-hmm. And even then, they lacked faith. Mm-hmm. But in our lives, we are tested. We're going to be tested as silver is tested and tried and put through the fire as gold is put through the fire. Because it's our purification process. It's our learning process. And so here it is, Jesus, just by storms, is teaching them, they not to depend, on his presence, for him to be there. First one, he was asleep. Second one, he wasn't even there until later.
Yeah.
But he shows up on time. He's
everywhere.
Right. I don't have to depend on Michelle's prayers to heal me because it's not Michelle. I got to have faith in myself to do my own trials and my own, healing, because it's my relationship with God, not Michelle's relationship with God.
Yeah. And we're never alone.
Yeah. So we get tested on these little things and they slowly progress. Like I said, the first time Jesus was there but asleep. Second time he wasn't there at all. Mm-hmm. So in our walk, as we're tested, even though we haven't done anything wrong, we're still going to be tested and tried because it's part of our purification. It's part of our strength building.
We're being trained.
Yes.
Right. Not only that, but the Bible says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So if we don't have that testimony, we don't have that history with God to know in the little trials how good and how faithful he is, then when we get to the big trials, we won't have the faith to be able to turn to him and know that he's going to be there and he's going to be faithful at those times as well. Just like, it's like, I always look at it, a relationship like a peeling onion, like he peels away one part of the onion and gradually we get to the center of it. But, he's there with us through the whole thing, even through the smaller things like Scott just said.
We have to learn through the smaller things so we have that skill set when it comes to the bigger things.
Yeah. And he cares about the little things. He cares about everything. Cast your cares upon me cast your cares upon him for he cares for you. Like that's what the word says. So we have to remember that what might appear to be small to someone else is important to God if it's important to us.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you.
Welcome. So we're going to take about 5 minutes